Hi, and welcome to my kitchen. My name is Sue, and today we're going to investigate the wonderful world of Greek bean soups. Most of the time when people think of Greek cooking, they think of moussaka, dolmades, spanakopita, and baklava, and especially roast lamb. And definitely those are all Greek foods, but they're for special occasions. The ordinary, everyday Greek person eats humble peasant-style foods, and today we're going to actually make one of the most comforting, delicious foods possible, Greek bean soup. To make Greek bean soup, you need some dried beans or canned beans, carrots, celery, onions, garlic, some tomato sauce, and of course olive oil, extra virgin olive oil. And for spices, bay leaves and some Greek oregano. Greek people use a variety of beans to make their bean soup. Anything from Great Northerns to garbanzos, lentil soup, black-eyed peas, and lima beans. Any of these beans would work well. You can use them in the dry variety, or if you can find them in the canned variety. And with black-eyed peas, you can even find them frozen. Today we're going to work on two recipes, actually identical except for the bean preparation. One recipe is going to use the dry Great Northern white beans, and the other recipe is going to use canned garbanzo beans. Now the canned beans are easy. All the work really is done for you. Just a matter of adding the flavorings and simmering a bit. But bean preparation, dry bean preparation, is a little more difficult, a little tricky. And that's what I want to show you this morning. First thing you've got to do with dry beans is wash them and rinse them well under cold water. Even though they're in a nice package and they have been sorted and cleaned a bit before being put in the package, you still need to do some work yourself, and that's what I'm going to do right now. Take your dried beans, put them in a colander, look through them, and see if you find anything like this. This is a little chunk of dirt, and obviously this is something you don't want to go into your bean soup. Also sort through it and look for broken, discolored beans, and those you removed also. Sort through it a little bit, and then be sure to rinse well under cold water. The purpose for the rinsing is to remove any bits of dirt and debris that may still be clinging to the beans, and remove funny looking beans as you go along. Just don't be too picky or you won't have any beans left in your soup. Okay, these beans are sorted, they're washed, and now they're ready for soaking. There are two methods for soaking, overnight soaking and the quick soak method. For overnight soaking, take your washed beans, put them in a pot, and cover them with about 2 quarts of water. Leave them overnight, let them stand overnight. The quick soak method is almost the same. Take your washed, clean beans, the 2 quarts of water, and place the pot on your stove. Heat to boiling. While I'm waiting for the beans to come to a boil, I'll tell you where this recipe comes from. It's actually my father's recipe. He apparently learned it from my grandmother, but then he took it and he became famous in Los Angeles for this wonderful bean soup. He made the soup almost every week. He would make a big pot, different different beans every week, and he would put them in jars, keep them in the refrigerator, and he'd take 1 jar of soup with him every day to work. That was his diet. And he lived to be 91. So there's something to eating a lot of beans. We know fiber's good for you, and you can make a vegetarian version of these beans with the good extra virgin olive oil. You've got a tasty dish that's really good for you. He was so well known for his beans that when he'd have a doctor's appointment, he'd take a couple jars with him to the doctor's office, and the nurses, staff, and the doctor were thrilled because that meant they had something really good and tasty for lunch. So this is pure Greek comfort food. It's simple, it's mellow, tasty, filling, delicious. It's simply delicious. You can see the water's come to a boil, the beans are beginning to boil. Set your timer for 2 minutes and let the beans boil for 2 minutes. When the 2 minutes are up, simply turn off the heat on your beans and leave them alone. Let them soak for anywhere from 1 to 4 hours. After 1 hour, they're ready to go, but you can leave them up to 4 hours. This is the quick soak method, and I think it's a lot easier because you don't have to plan ahead for this. You can just grab a pound of beans and get going. It's been about an hour, so the beans are ready. These are the beans from the quick soak method. You would do exactly the same thing for the overnight method. Take the beans that have been soaking either overnight or from the quick soak method, and you can see that they've enlarged quite a bit. They've gotten a little bit softer, but they're still raw. They need to be cooked. At this point, you want to drain out the soaking water and rinse them once again. The reason for doing this is simple. If you cook them in the soaking water, the beans will be more gassy, and some people might have some discomfort after eating your delicious bean soup. So by getting rid of the soaking water and starting with fresh water to cook them, you reduce the chance of creating an uncomfortable situation for your family, friends, and guests. So drain out the soaking water, rinse the beans, rinse the pan a bit, put the beans back in the pan, and this time add 2 quarts of water. While we're waiting for the beans to come to a boil, let me say a few words about things you really shouldn't do. Under no circumstances should you salt the beans or put any kind of tomato product in the beans until they are fully cooked. Salt and any kind of acidic product like tomatoes or vinegar will serve to harden the beans, then they won't tenderize. And you could be cooking them for a good 4 hours, crossing your fingers and hoping that they'll tenderize, and it just won't happen because they've been salted or they've had tomatoes added before they're cooked. So a really important thing with dried beans is you get them prepared, you get them cooked nice and tender before you add all the different flavorings and seasonings, especially salt and tomato. The entire soaking process is necessary for very hard beans. Beans like garbanzos, Great Northern or navy beans, and lima beans. They absolutely need to be soaked, either using the overnight method or the quick soak method. However, black-eyed peas and lentils require no soaking. So when you're using these beans, you would start at this point. Wash them, rinse them, get them in the pot, get them boiled, and start cooking them. And all this information is on the recipe on the website. Tweeton.com. While we're waiting for the beans to boil, we can start preparing our vegetables. We need anywhere from 2 to 3 carrots, a large onion, the larger the better, 2 to 4 cloves of garlic, depending on how much garlic you like in your food, and 2 to 3 stalks of celery. And you can see the beans are boiling now. The thing to do now is to turn the heat down to a low simmer. The beans will simmer anywhere from 1 hour to 1.5 hours. After 1 hour, you're going to need to check them. Lift up the top, give it a stir so it doesn't boil over like it just did. The reason you want them to simmer is because you want the beans to keep their shape. You don't want them subjected to a vigorous boil where they're going to break up and the skins are going to come off and that kind of thing. They need to kind of keep their shape. So a low simmer, and from time to time you might have to lift the lid and give them a stir to keep them from boiling over. While the beans are cooking, it's time to work on the vegetables. We have 2 stalks of celery, 2 carrots, 4 cloves of garlic, and an onion. Thing to do is just start chopping. You want to dice about this small. It can be smaller, but if it's too small, then you have to work too hard cutting it up. So this is just fine. For the celery, I dice just about like so. Again, if you want to make it smaller, fine. It probably should be no larger than the bean that you're working with. And I'm putting them into a pan to be sauteed in olive oil. For the carrots, I prefer to cut them in little teeny pieces rather than slices. Just like this, maybe a little smaller. It just depends on how much time and energy you want to put into this. Remember, this is a peasant style soup, so it doesn't have to be beautifully chopped vegetables that are perfect and uniform. Garlic, remove the tough outer skin, and mince it a bit or chop it finely. But again, it's a peasant style soup. It just doesn't have to be perfect. So these are your vegetables that will go into your pan to be sauteed. All right, all the vegetables are chopped and ready, and it's time to cook them. Put them on a medium heat. Add about 1/4 cup to 1/3 cup of extra virgin olive oil. And saute them. You don't want them to brown. All you want to do is cook them enough so that they're partially cooked or close to fully cooked when you add them to the cooked beans. So now it's just a matter of watching them, stirring them, and letting them cook. Now all these bean soups can be made completely vegetarian. Beans, vegetables, olive oil. That's it. However, if you want a heartier soup, you can add a pound of ground beef or ground lamb. When I make garbanzo beans in particular, I like to add a pound of ground beef. Look for the leanest ground beef you can find, mainly because you want to taste the olive oil, not the beef fat. So just brown the ground meat in a frying pan. Just brown the meat, and that's all. You don't really need to season it now unless you feel absolutely led to. Ground beef is a nice addition to any of the bean soups. So is ground lamb, lamb being very traditional Greek meat. What won't work is any kind of smoked pork product. That's really not authentic. It won't give you the same taste as a true Greek bean soup. No bacon, no smoked ham hocks, no ham bones. You add one of those products to this recipe, it'll taste delicious. It just won't taste great. I like to cook the ground beef until all the moisture is gone. Just keep sauteing the vegetable combination. If you like, you can put the top on, a lid on, and that'll help cook the vegetables. The main purpose is to cook the vegetables and to get them infused with that delicious extra virgin olive oil. All right, the ground beef is cooked and most of the liquid has evaporated. I used a very lean ground beef. However, to make sure there's no additional beef fat in the bean soup, I'm going to drain it on 3 paper towels in a bowl. Just spoon it out, and the paper towels will absorb any excess fat. Just spread it out. Into all the corners, and the paper towels will absorb the fat. Okay, now if you're really concerned about getting rid of the animal fat, here's another thing that you can do. You can take the paper towels, line a colander with the paper towels, put your beef, ground beef or ground lamb in there, and pour boiling water over it. That actually flushes out all the fat. Let it drain out, and you're left with basically almost a fat-free meat product. This is an extra step that can be taken for people who are on special diets or just concerned about having too much animal fat in their diets. Vegetables have been cooking, and they're all ready. You can see they're not browned, they're just cooked. And you can see the oil that we use, which is good because that's for the flavoring. The beans are also cooked. I checked them after 45 minutes, and they were done, so I turned off the heat. What you're looking for is that they're tender, but not mushy. So I would suggest, because of the varying degrees of moisture in the dried beans, after cooking for 45 minutes, you should start checking them. You don't want to overcook them, but you do want them to be tender. Just to recap, when working with dried beans, first thing you want to do is sort through them, rinse them, wash them carefully. Then you need to soak them, either the overnight soaking method or the quick soaking method. Remember to discard the soaking water. Don't cook the beans in that. Put in fresh water and then cook the beans from anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour, possibly even up to an hour and a half if it's a very hard bean. Remember that lentils and black-eyed peas do not require soaking beforehand. You can just get started with those. cooking them. Now, we're going to have vegetarian Great Northern bean soup. We're also going to have garbanzo bean soup, and I'm cheating. I'm using canned garbanzo beans, and the only thing you need to remember about this is you'll need about 4 cans, because whether it's dried beans or canned beans, you're looking for anywhere from 6 to 8 cups of cooked beans to work with. So 4 cans of canned garbanzo beans. Be sure to drain these and rinse these too. Once you've drained them, rinse them. This again is to help with that gassy problem that some people have with beans. Okay, take your beans, put them in a pot. To this, when you're using canned beans, add about 6 cups of water, 1.5 quarts of water. Now you can find canned garbanzo beans, also canned black-eyed peas, and instead of Great Northerns, you can always use canned white kidney beans. You can often find frozen black-eyed peas. All you need to do with these is follow the package directions and get them to a cooked stage. We have a pot of cooked Great White Northern beans and a pot of canned garbanzo beans. Now we're ready to actually prepare the soup. To the garbanzo beans, because I'm making them with meat, they're non-vegetarian, add the ground beef. I don't know if you can see it, but it's very dry looking. There's hardly any fat at all left. How could it survive with the paper towels and that boiling hot water? To each pot, add your chopped, cooked vegetables. Add 1 can of tomato sauce to each pot. I don't expect most of you to make 2 pots of beans at a time, but this is just to show you the preparation for using canned beans and the preparation for using dry beans. Each pot gets 1 or 2 bay leaves. Each pot gets some salt. With the canned beans, they've already been salted, so you want to be careful. Don't overdo it. Just a little bit of salt. After the beans have cooked with all the ingredients for a half hour, taste the soup and see if you feel it needs more salt. The dry beans, on the other hand, have not been prepared with any salt, so you might need even up to a tablespoon of salt. But again, use a larger amount, put it in, and after all the ingredients have cooked for about a half hour, taste it, and then adjust the seasoning. And lastly, you can add some oregano. I prefer Greek oregano because it has a really great taste. And I grow it. And then I dry it. You can add about a teaspoon or so, just crumble it up in there. This is from my last harvest. I dried it. This is a Greek oregano plant that I'm going to be planting soon, or I might just keep it here in the kitchen because it's doing so well. I could, if I wanted to, snip a few leaves in here too. Now, stir everything up. And take a look at it. At this point, if you wanted to, you could add anywhere from 2 cups to 1 quart more water, just depending on how soupy you want the soup to be. If you want it chunkier, more like a bean stew, then just leave it like this. You can see this is pretty chunky. It doesn't have a whole lot of broth in proportion to the vegetables and meat. Now the only thing that's left is to put the soups back on the heat, simmer them for a half hour, and you're ready to serve. Don't boil them, simmer them. The soups are done. This is the vegetarian soup that we made from dry beans. When you're done, you need to just check the soup and adjust the seasonings. Absolutely delicious. The garbanzo bean soup is also ready. Because it was made with canned garbanzos, it cooked about 45 minutes. Doesn't that look good? And even though it has meat in it, it's very, very low fat. You can have a nice lunch, a nice dinner. All that you need are some slices of sweet French bread. For an authentic Greek treat, some feta cheese, some cubes of feta cheese. And to go with the cheese and the bread, some nice Greek olives like the Kalamata olives. And if you're really adventuresome, get some of these oil-cured, dry, brine-cured, wrinkly things. These are the super bitter things that only a true Greek would love, but they're really good once you really get into them. And there you have a delicious lunch, a delicious dinner. It's peasant fare, but it's oh so good and oh so wholesome. It's simply delicious. Oh, I forgot. We don't pay our camera crew. So this is it. Come on, guys.